Good morning to everyone. Be'ezrat Hashem, Mincha is going to be 7 p.m. Please be on time. Continuing in the Halachot of Muktze, Chacham Ovadia Yosef discusses a needle that's used for sewing, for stitching. A needle used for stitching is Muktze on Shabbat. Why? It's a Kli shemelachto le'isur. Stitching, of course, is not allowed on Shabbat. Oreg is one of the violations, one of the 39 melachot. And therefore, to have a needle which primary purpose is the ones that have a hole, the ones that you sew with, those types of needles are used for stitching. Therefore, it is an instrument of Muktze. It doesn't really matter that it's very, very small. You can't move it from one place to another. You can't handle it unless you're following the guidelines of tzorech gufo and tzorech mekomo, as was discussed previously. So the question is as follows. Let's say a person has a splinter in his skin. Is he able to take out the splinter using that needle, that sewing needle? So like we said, tzorech gufo, for the purpose of the usage of the needle, one is allowed to handle a kli shemelachto le'isur. Since he's using it for something that is permitted to be done, he's allowed to take out the splinter using that needle, and then when he's done, he puts it back in its place, and then again, it resorts back to the status of Muktze, but in the meantime, when he was using it, it was fine. One may ask a question, wait a second, if that's the case, how is it mutar? Isn't he going to bleed? And we know that bleeding on Shabbat is a problem. A person is not allowed to cause himself to bleed. As a matter of fact, the Ben Ish Chai talks about if a person has sometimes they used to have, I guess, one of these games where you would punch each other and you would get bruises. He says you have to be very careful not to bruise someone on Shabbat, because what that does is it causes the blood to come out of where it is. Even though it's internal, it's still a violation of Shabbat. So how could a person go ahead and use the needle on Shabbat if it causes him to bleed? So number one, it's not necessarily definite that it's going to cause him to bleed, and he's not intending for that. So it's called the psik resha. It's called the eno mitkaven. He's not intending for it. So if it's not definite, then it's okay. And even if it is definite, the prohibition is on a rabbinic level because he's not interested. He doesn't need the blood. So it's called milacha she'ena tzricha legufa. As well as it's b'makom tsar, because there's pain involved. Therefore, the chachamim permitted the usage of the needle. So even if he's for sure going to bleed, because it's so deep, he knows he's going to bleed, he's still allowed to take it out because the chachamim imposed, superimposed, you could say, heter, a permissible way of doing it, and they said that b'makom tsar, we did not decree a decree, and therefore one is allowed to take out the needle, the splinter using the needle, no problems. It is mutar to do, and then once again the needle resorts back to its status of Muktze. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.